Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show with our guest, Aditya Nagrath. He's a PhD in computer science and mathematics, and basically he started a thing called Elephant Learning Math Academy. And it's sort of hard to even say because it's hard to even believe, but they will teach your kid 1 year's worth of math in 3 months by sort of backing up, creating their foundation that they may have already or may lack. And then they teach them the language of math, and all of a sudden they go rocketing forward because of a better approach to learning math. Why this? Well, I mean, we kept hearing all these parents talking about how hard it is to do the online training and, you know, our kids getting enough math. And I thought, man, what a perfect guy to have on and to talk about this new form of learning, this new way of approaching the problem of math. And I just thought, you know, with COVID and everything else, this would be a really interesting show to present for all of you. Plus, Aditya is super smart, and you're going to enjoy him just because he's an interesting person. Again, Elephant Learning is the company. You can go there and check out their services if you've got a kid that wants to either do better at math or just loves it like crazy and wants to get pushed harder or just build that lifelong foundation for math. And there's a lot of things coming from these guys. They're just talking about the tip of the iceberg. Their whole learning program is really going to change how we do things. So just in general, I thought that would be interesting. No matter where you are in the world, thank you all so much for listening. I think you'll appreciate this episode especially. But just in general, yeah, thanks. Thanks for checking us out and continuing to support the show. 5 episodes a week live, and then also 5 podcast releases, and all the podcast releases are all from the live episodes. So whether you watch on the live side or you listen on the podcast side, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a great several month stretch. The show has grown so much. It's incredible. And that's all because of all of you. And definitely when you guys send your messages, I appreciate it. So many of you do reach out, thinking about Brad and Tish right now, especially. But there's so many of you that do that say, hey, thanks, great job. You're doing good things. Keep it up. And I hear all of you, and we definitely are. Okay, a couple other things real quick. They're winding up, but there are still some tickets left for the Save the Brave rifle raffle. You can go to blackstonearms.com and pick up your ticket there. It's $100. If you don't win, well, you're giving to Save the Brave, and you know that's important to us. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. And if you do win, it's a $5,000 value for that rifle. $5,000 value for the Save the Brave rifle. All right, so here we go. Let's get this going. Here comes Aditya Nagrath.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, this is Dr. Aditya Nagrath, and you are watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Well, we've had a lot of PhDs on the show, Dr. Nagrath, and you are also an entrepreneur. So it's fun to have different people from different disciplines. You have one that is literally impossible for me to get, and I think you can appreciate this. I'm a communications major, a former spy. I'm a person that talks to people, but I've got an advanced degree, and I think the highest algebraic math I've ever completed was sophomore year in high school. I did, I think, a full year, maybe half a year of pre-algebra. I never got above that. I was so bad at math. And I tried and tried and tried. Now, look, that doesn't mean I don't have a command of stats and other things. But, you know, if you ask me to balance a quadratic equation, I can't do it. I would literally, I could never figure out how to learn that. So for everybody who's listening, Aditya is a entrepreneur who started a company called Elephant Learning. And basically, the slogan right up front is learn 1 year of math in 3 months. And I think, especially with COVID going on, man, it's a great time to talk about alternate ways to learn, because one of the things we do know is the big educational system does not reliably give us the outcomes that we want. I think that's 100% fair. No matter what side of the political equation you're on or anything else, we struggle to do right by our kids because these things are hard. And that's why guys like you are invaluable. So thanks for coming on. Tell us a little bit about Elephant Learning, and then we'll get into some fun questions.
Sure. So Elephant Learning is this system we built to help teach children mathematics. It's an online math academy. And on average, children in our system learn a year and a half of mathematics over the course of 10 weeks when they use our system just 30 minutes per week. And what we do is we focus on really helping children understand the language of mathematics, because that's what the research says is missing. So typically, people try to treat mathematics kind of as something that you do or something that you have to solve or an activity. But really what's happening is we're trying to learn this language, and the language that we're learning is of mental tools, of concepts, ideas, right? And once we have a facility of that language and we can apply it, we can use it to solve problems.
So this is a foundational tool for young kids, or do you guys open this up to a variety of people from, and humans, I guess you would say, from all groups?
Right. Well, so right now the program is only in English, and that's important.
Yeah.
But if your student speaks English, then this will be effective. And we cover from counting through algebra. So we start with young children. We teach them the foundational language. We build them up through addition. We build them up, to 3-digit numbers, 4-digit numbers. We give them a good number sense. We do it from several different angles. And then we go through multiplication, division, fractions, decimals, and percentages. And then after that, they kind of graduate into speaking sentences in mathematics, right? Because those are the foundational vocabulary that once you've kind of got a good grasp on, you can now start talking about mathematics. And that's what happens in algebra. And we cover the most common misconceptions in algebra, because even at the university level, we see students who maybe don't know why they're subtracting 5 from both sides. And if we can get them that understanding of what the equal sign means when we write it down, after the elementary age, well, then they can participate in the classroom.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. That's sort of where I lost my ability. I'm plenty smart, but just with math, I could never find someone who could explain it in a way that made sense to my brain. And I don't think I have like a math dyslexia or anything. It's just, and it wasn't for lack of effort. I just didn't have that language base. But let's go back a little bit. You're talking about young folks primarily. Okay, so let's say that my kid is in the 8th grade and, they're on the regular math track, but I can see that they're starting to fall behind and I want to use your service. How far back in time are we going to push this person to kind of work on their, parts of speech, if you will, like from English, to understand the basics? Like let's back up and refound this. Is that a good principle, or how do you guys take a kid who's, again, starting to lose pace and definitely not thriving in math and get them going in the right direction?
Sure. So look, if you've got someone that's in upper level mathematics, even going into the university level, that is struggling with that level of mathematics, it's typically an idea that's missing in algebra or earlier. So the good news is that our system will help remediate that student and get them to be able to participate. What we do to be able to work with this student is we start out with a placement exam. And the placement exam is intended to start behind the student. And actually, we give you this report afterwards, which tells you almost exactly what you need to know about like where the student is and how they're understanding mathematics. And honestly, it's extremely valuable, but it's just a part of the service for free. I mean, if we were to charge for it, it'd probably be maybe $200, right? Like Kumon charges $100 for their placement exams, and Mathnasium charges for their placement exams. We don't charge for ours. You get that and the report as a part of the service. And what we do is we basically walk up the subjects that we have in our system. And so we don't lay it out as a straight line. Just imagine it as this complex matrix, right? And we ask them the most challenging questions from each subject. The questions that when they answer, we know that not only do they understand the concept, but they're also applying it at the same time. So for example, if you're being tested out of multiplication and division, one of the questions would look like, I have 7 things in a row, and we show the student 7 rows. And there's a guideline at the 5th row, meaning that they could just eyeball that there's 2 more than 5, right?
Right.
So at this point, they're applying addition, right? Because it's 5 plus 2. They're applying, the curtain's open for 4 seconds, right? So the curtain's open, you can see it for 4 seconds, it closes. So if they answer the question correctly, they're applying addition to figure out that, there's 7 rows. They're applying multiplication because they now know to use multiplication to solve the problem. They didn't count to get the answer. And they also showed proficiency in knowing what 7 times 7 is, even if they had to use a piece of paper to get it. So when they answer that question, we know they get it. They may not have fluency, like they may not have speed, but we know they have understanding, right? So as we're walking up these subjects, if they answer any of these questions incorrectly, and typically they get 2 chances to answer, if they answer any of these incorrectly, we know that we found the subject that they are in, and then we start tuning to them from there. So it's an adaptive technology that continues to adapt to the student. As they're getting it right, we're giving them more challenging things. As they're getting it wrong, we start falling back to find out where that gap is. But to start out with, this placement exam, I mean, to be honest with you, could even give the teacher enough information to start helping that student very quickly.
Is math one of those things that you have to learn individually to really, really get good at it? I mean, it seems like, so just from my own experience again too, and I struggled. I tried in college and everything else, but we used to do the old, felt tip pen on the overhead, and you'd look and you'd watch, and I would follow. And then when I'd go to practice it, I'd get through question 8. And then all of a sudden there'd be some variable about that I couldn't make the next leap. And it was it drove me crazy. And I could look in the back for the answer, and I could figure my way through the answer, but I didn't know it. I was just oh, I can make that number show up. I didn't have a mastery. I was copying things and not trying to get the answer right, because I was really trying to learn it, but I couldn't. And I always felt like if someone could slow down and help me understand this language, I always thought of it as a language. So is it better to learn it like this, or is the classroom a key to the foundation?
Well, so, and the classroom's now trying to do this. That's what Common Core is. The implementation tends to actually, to be honest, piss parents off, but, right? But the intent was good. So that's the good news behind Common Core. Here's the thing. If you don't understand what multiplication is, it's going to be really hard for you to use it, right? Now, you can memorize your multiplication tables, and this is what this looks like. We were at the Westwood Chili Festival, and we had this computer set up to multiplication, and this girl came up, said, I'm doing multiplication in school. And we had it on the easy stuff. So we put up 4 groups of 5 things, and she counted to get 20. And then I said, well, what's 4 times 5? And she said 20 immediately. So it means she memorized her multiplication tables, but she doesn't know how to use multiplication to solve a real life problem that's in front of her. Right? Yeah. In this case, it feels to the student like they're learning useless information. That's what it feels like to them. And they can do this until they get to algebra. But again, if you don't have that understanding of what multiplication is, and then you see 7 times X, what could that mean to you? Right?
Yeah.
Because now we're adding the variable on top of it. And the variable is not a challenging concept to learn. We teach it actually to children who are completing our addition curriculum. When we finish addition, we start to give them this idea of, I'm thinking of a number. And when you add 5 to the number, you get 10. It's part of the addition curriculum, right? And then we start calling it something. We say, I'm thinking of a number, call it X. And when I add 5 to it, I get 10. The biggest fear that students have when they get to algebra is that variable, because it's that switch. But really the problem is not that they don't understand what the variable is that maybe they don't understand what multiplication is, or they don't understand what the equal sign means. A lot of elementary school teachers will say 5 plus 4 equals. And so then the student gets the idea that equal means evaluate. So now when you're talking about it in terms of an equation, what does equal mean? 3x plus 7 equals 8. Well, I don't know, this thing evaluate, right? This fundamental understanding of the language, honestly, I believe is more important, because as a software developer, right, the computer will do a lot of the heavy lifting for me if I can tell the computer what to do, right? And that's the important part. 90% of parents want their children to be able to code in some fashion. And to be honest with you, with the way science is going, I think every STEM major is probably going to have to learn how to code, so that they can talk with the computer at that level, that they're getting it to do what they want.
Yeah.
And if they have that ability, what would that do for mankind? Think about it, right? If the politicians and business people of tomorrow could even understand what the STEM people are talking about, that would be wonderful. That's what we're working on.
Yeah. And just to echo that point and make it a little more rich, we talk to a lot of astrophysicists and cosmologists on the show, and these guys lean on math hard. And at some point, really early on, they no longer need to grab graph paper and a pencil. They need to let the computer do that, so they can do the hard work of destroying the box, not even thinking inside of it. And so guys like Andrew Friedman, who are, Nobel grade cosmologists, these guys, they have to code. They have to teach the computer how to do their brain work for them so they can do the more conceptualized, like breaking down things. Him and his team used two different distant galaxies as random number generators. I don't know if you know about this test, but it's an incredible thing. So I'd rather he think about these impossible things, like trying to determine, answer a question from over 100 years ago between Bohr and Einstein, and it's remarkable, and they don't need the calculator. So I love that you're saying that, because you're right. We have to all understand what the possibilities are and the kind of problems that we're solving with math, with AI, with coding. Let me go back again though, and let's talk about the link between philosophy and and math in general. I mean, when you're told that as a kid, that you have to understand, certain aspects of math to understand problems like philosophy, it doesn't make any damn sense. But then all of a sudden you're talking to cosmologists and you're linking math to religion. And so it's not just simple things, it's everything.
So a PhD in mathematics is a doctorate in philosophy. And so as a branch of education, you're looking at philosophy, and then all of these other things break out. Like physics is also a PhD, right? A philosophic degree. And the thing about philosophy is that you're defining the words. So I had a philosophy minor, right? You're defining the words, and then you're determining what's true from those definitions. And so if we can agree on the definitions, then we can agree on the outcomes as well.
Yeah.
The difference between the philosophy major and the math major was the things that we were talking about in philosophy were things like knowledge and things like love. Not very easy to define, not easy to get agreement on definition. And the things we were talking about in mathematics were very, very concrete, and everyone agreed that those are the assumptions that should be in place for the basis of a set.
Right.
And now what's true about sets? And so at a very advanced level, right? And this is actually what's really cool about this project, right? Because when I took it on and I started to understand what the scientists were doing for these early age education students, right? For the early age students, it actually happened to be exactly what the professors do at the PhD level.
Huh.
They introduce the jargon, they introduce the vocabulary, right? We define it very precisely. We start to play with it to see if you can recognize the thing at play. And then you actually have to use the idea to go prove something else, or you have to prove something new about it, or you have to come up with something new, right? So that's the cool thing about it, is that it is a philosophy all the way down to what the students are doing. And it's just kind of a quirk, say, of how maybe generations have taught math to the next generation, that it's become about do addition until you understand what addition is, right? And so we're just approaching it from a different angle. Give me 5 things, give me 4 more things. How many things do you have now? Having that experience is literally the idea, the concept. If you don't experience that, you're just not gonna get it when someone writes 5 + 4 = 9 on the board, right? And even as a teacher in the room, what else could you say besides this means give me 5 things, give me 4 more things? How many things do I have now? And again, if the student in the room has not had that experience for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be lost. And I mean, this is kind of a new thing. Parents are busy. It's hard for us to be on top of whether students can do that. People in the household are income earners. And I mean, it's just challenging. It's just challenging for the parent. It's challenging for the student. And what we've done here is we've made it managed by exception, honestly. So the parent doesn't typically have to get involved, but our system will alert them when they have to get involved. And the beautiful part is the process is super easy. What you do is you just go to our history screen, and it'll say the question that the student missed. It'll say they missed it, right? And you hit try. And now you get an idea of exactly the question we're asking them, right? Could be, give me 5 things, give me 4 more things. How many do I have now?
Yeah.
Right? So now you've had the experience that we're about to give to the student. You bring the student in, you do the same thing, do it in parent mode so you're not affecting their score. And you have them answer it. And you don't stop them if they're getting the wrong answer. You don't tell them anything. You just let them just be calm, right? Nothing's wrong. It's not a big deal.
Right.
When the student answers and they answer incorrectly, you just say, well, why do you think that's the right answer? Or how did you come to that answer, right? So like if the why is triggering any anxiety, you just want to get what their thinking is. And when they say out loud what their thinking is, you're going to understand what the misconception is, what the misunderstanding is. And you're going to be able to distinguish that idea for them or give them a hint. And if you give them a hint, it's better because then they get that aha moment in their head from having figured it out. And it becomes more permanent.
Yeah, there's the problem of, sometimes you have to stand in front of your peers and get things right just to grow that way. But there's also the problem of fear of failure and pushing a person to the back of the classroom mentally because they don't want to. But, what we need to do is say, like, look, when you don't know something, and you make a mistake because you don't like it. That's a point of growth right there. Now we can conquer this point of growth and you will be forever better from that one little position. But we don't approach it that way. Instead, it kind of focuses on the fear side of things. And so I like that you guys are creating these opportunities to reframe learning as an experience of constant growth through errors, because it turns out, I don't know about you, but I get things wrong more often than I can even comprehend, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I was wrong about that for a long time, but now I've grown and gotten better. I love that about what you guys are doing. Let's say that I wanted to, work on improving my math ability. Is this something that's viable for me? I'm terrible at algebra, but I understand geometry and I can't do it geometric, but I know like the principles. I know stats. And that's about where it stops for me. Is this something that's useful for me too, as a dad, as an adult, that kind of thing?
We've had adults go through the system, and they go through super fast, right? The thing is that we've all had the mathematical experiences, right? Like the problem is that if the student looks at you and says, when are you ever going to use this? For those of us that are using it, we're using it so often that we don't even think about it anymore. Yeah. Like you tell us, well, when do you use this? I don't know, right? Because I multiply and I add and I solve equations in my head as a second nature. So like, I don't know I'm using math, right? Yeah. When you're driving down the road and you're saying, well, how long is it until I get to the next town? And you quickly figure that out based on your speed. You're doing algebra, right? But you're not going to say, oh yeah, I'm sitting here doing algebra, right? Yeah. And so the thing is that like, this is one of the most challenging things is that it's so useful if you understand it and you're going to use it everywhere. But at the same time, it's so challenging to communicate to the student where they're going to use it. And that's another nice thing about the way that we do this, right? Because like as a parent, if you see your student struggling with a word problem, right? Everything in our system is a word problem. It's just we're visualizing it for the student too. So now they even have a mental point of reference to think about when they are solving the math problem on a piece of paper. And so, ultimately for the parent, we've had parents come through and they just go so much faster. Like if you would go through our system in under a week. Yeah. You've had all the math experiences that are relevant here, and you're just going to see it laid out for a little bit more formally. And then you'll just connect and you'll just say, oh, wow, so I got it, right? And that's honestly what we see. And to be honest with you, like when we have a student that's like behind, like 2 or 3 years behind or whatever, like for example, someone who needs to be learning multiplication and division, that's what they're teaching in class. And maybe they're struggling around the area of addition, right? They will typically learn all of that so quickly because our system moves very quickly as they're getting it. We will typically see them pick up a year or 2 years of math, maybe in the first 2 weeks. They've had the experiences out in real life, right? And now we've just connected it to the written math for them, right? Because like after we say, give me 5 things, give me 4 things, how many do I have now? We write on the screen, 5 plus 4 equals 9, right? And hopefully the parents there to help like younger students connect it, right? Because if you got a younger student, things still work well. We've got 4, 5, and 6-year-olds that after 6 months in the system are doing fractions, decimals, and percentages. It's not beyond them. Yeah. It's not beyond them. And so like from both ends of the spectrum, just the algorithms that we have underneath and the way we've laid it out, like together, play together in such a way that just, it works very, very well with whoever's using it.
I want to, that's such a great thing. Like when my daughter was small, and she's 23 now, so, this is a long time ago, but I wanted to start introducing some of these concepts to her. And again, I'm no mathematician, but I know that I know how I use math on a day-to-day basis. And so we went to the grocery store and I said, get me 5 apples. And she didn't know what 5 even meant. She could count to 5, but to actually physically go, well, here's 5 apples and now get me 4 more, and then getting over that hump between going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, no, you can look, you can see this is always going to be 5 apples. You don't have to count them each time, and that was sort of how I tried to introduce math to her, was to explain, okay, bring me 5 apples and 2 kiwis. And she's running all over the produce aisle. And I'm like, how many pieces of fruit do we have? How many kiwis? How many? And so it was a fantastic tool. I just didn't know how to go anywhere past that or to code any kind of solution into that. But I kind of gathered that's what you guys are doing for young kids.
Yeah. And what you're doing there too is you're getting more vocabulary for the fruits, right? So these are wonderful activities. And that's another thing that we give to parents is within the reports. So if you open up down to the milestone level. So at first you'll get there, you'll see one subject open. You can click on any of the subjects. I could show it to you if you'd like. But basically we have advice for the parents on how they could take this learning outside of the system. So whatever level the student is at, we're going to tell you something like, for example, have them give you 5 things, have them give you 4 more things, or try to do it with your fingers. And what I like doing it with the fingers is because now they have to use their imagination. So imagine my fingers are ponies and how many ponies do I have, right? And if I had 2 more ponies, how many would I have, right? So that was something I had done with my chiropractor's daughter when I was waiting once, right? And she loved it because she's using her imagination and she's playing this game on top of that.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about mathematics. If you're doing it right at the student's level, it feels like a puzzle game. And that's the whole idea, is we've gamified those activities so it feels like a puzzle game for the student. But again, right, for both the parent, for the student, we've thought about this from all the angles. My background prior to doing this was I would walk into companies and I'd figure out, how do I automate as much of their process as I can and build it as quickly as I can. It's a contract software firm. And so basically I applied that here. What would I want in order to teach my child mathematics, right? Well, I'd want to know exactly where they're at and what would I have to do today, right now, if I wanted to play with them and have to teach them math, right?
Right. So
all the information is there. And then also the exception handling is there, meaning that you can go to the history screen, you can see what they missed and you can work with them.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to approach the problem, taking the modern application. I mean, this is exactly what you do for these kids, but you walk in and you see math solutions or math problems that you have to then solve. And then how do you transfer that to a little kid? Give us an idea, just specifically, when a kid is behind, and again, maybe they're doing it, in my day, we had to speed do times tables. So you just burned it into your head, and you worked your way up to the 3s, then the 4s, and all the, and you're just constantly just going so fast. You didn't have time to really cognate. You were just almost, burning the memory in your head. But how do you tell if your kid is someone that would need something like elephant learning, even if they're doing okay in math and you're just like, why not play with this? It sounds like fun.
The canary in the coal mine is the word problems. So our children do well in mathematics on an international basis right up until algebra. And the problem is that because the test scores fail in algebra, we start asking, well, what are we doing here that's not working, right? In middle school, our children don't measure up. And the problem happens to be that actually 4 out of 5 students start kindergarten unprepared for the kindergarten curriculum. And so they don't have enough language to understand the teacher. And so in a graph, and let me just show it to you right here. This is what this says. So this is all amongst income lines. And it's basically 4 out of 5 students start unprepared. 1, 2, 3, 4, they're unprepared. Here's the 5th, right? And if you look at the next graph, this is income level. So top 25, middle 20, 25 to 50 to 75, 25 to 50, and then the lowest 25% income earners. And this is the percentile at which they're entering the schooling system, right? So this matches the previous graph that I just showed you, but now it's showing throughout, what is their percentile coming out?
Right.
And all this graph really says is that if your student entered kindergarten able to understand the kindergarten teacher, as far as it concerns mathematics, then the education system works for them. And if they didn't, well, then, if they're lucky enough to be here, then they tend to maybe start to catch up a little bit. But for the rest, it's basically flat to down. And that's basically the problem that we're trying to solve, right? Can we interject that language? Can we interject enough of that language to get them to catch up? And then the education system works for them, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing here, just filling in that language gap, is the most important thing we can be doing. The fluency will come because as you see where to use multiplication out in real life, just like driving a car, right? As you see where you're going to be using it and you start doing it, it'll come, right? And you can try to get your student to memorize the multiplication tables. But the way that you would know right now, and this is really the scary part, right? And before I started this project, I was the same way, right? When the student answers correctly, most people say thumbs up. Yeah. It's over, right? So if they are memorizing the multiplication tables, it might actually be counterproductive.
Right.
The canary in the coal mine is the word problems. So when the teacher gives a word problem for the student to solve, it's creating a situation like what we're doing in our game. I have 7 rows of 7 things, right? But they're doing it with ladders or whatever, right? It's a word problem. They're setting up a story, and then the student's supposed to figure out what are the key facts to multiply to get the answer.
Yep.
They have to apply the multiplication to do it. So memorizing your multiplication tables isn't going to do that without that understanding of what multiplication is.
That's like that old trick with your 9s times tables, and just to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 vertically down the column, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it reverses the number. And so it's a trick rather than a comprehension. Now, sometimes shortcuts are great, but in this case, I always felt that 9 trick was not helpful to someone to really master what these things are. Not that times table memorization is right, but how often are you going to have to solve, multiplication tables of 9 in a row where that's even a useful trick, Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
I've seen that meme on the internet. And I mean, these are just fun things to get people interested in the tricks. The thing is that once you've abstracted it, once you've got that understanding out of it, I mean, these neat tricks come into play when they come into play.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not useful. But like the thing is that over a lifetime, you're going to do so much multiplication that whatever helps you, right?
Yeah.
But it only works, again, if you understand multiplication. And more than that, if you could understand multiplication at a time when it could make a difference, right? If you did it in the 3rd grade, then your life trajectory is different than someone who didn't.
Yeah. Hey, my Aunt Dackie's a family nickname. She's got a question in here. I think it's great. What math language should a child know before entering kindergarten? Like how early is too early, and what can they do? Because we see those. I remember like in the old days, like 60 Minutes would like show a kid a measle, like a chart full of red dots, like 81, and the kid would could cognate just from looking at things. It's incredible. So what's expectable? What's expected? What's too much? Are you guys built for that kind of learning?
Right. This was the thing that was most surprising to me when I started out. So like the way we got started was I met one of my ex-professors who was one of my advisors in the PhD program. And that's what he told me was that these students are entering unprepared for the kindergarten curriculum. And I thought, like, how is that even possible? Where does kindergarten curriculum even start? So the first thing they start to learn is counting to 20. And it assumes that the student can count to 10. And the issue is that the parent believes counting to 10 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which is exactly what I thought when Alvaro told me. And I go, well, what does kindergarten mean? He says, kindergarten means give me 10 things. The student is able to slide over 10 things and stop on 10. And I'm like, that's a completely different skill.
Yeah.
That's a completely different skill, right? And in one, they have a complete understanding of the numbers, right? Because if you can ask, just like you did with your daughter, if you can ask them for an n number of things and they can give it to you, then they understand that number. And they also have this extra skill that happens.
Right.
They're able to hold their number in the head as they're counting it out to you and remember to stop there, which is kind of like children chewing gum and walking for the for the first time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're building mental like capabilities, like, you know, working memory and like, you know, how many things can I do things like, I'm sorry, I'm taking this out of my pocket. Anyway, but I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And one of the things too that my daughter and I did, as I think back now, was, you know, grab 5 apples, grab 3 kiwis, you know, and this is, I'm compressing time here, you know, and grab me a couple of grapefruits. They're on that one over there. You know, she can't read yet, but I can point. And she would go and be like, how many total fruit do we have? You know, we have this many. Okay. You know what? That's too many apples. Take back 2. And then, you know, she could do that. I'm like, and they're just constantly making her work through like what the numbers might be. And then we made the next leap. Like if each of these things costs $1, how much money? Because she knew what money was. She just didn't know, like, she knew the concept that you had to give something to get something, but she didn't understand what money was. So I'm like, just dollars. And I pulled out $1. I'm like, if I have to give $1 for every one of these. And so it made her jump over to the next track. And it was not easy. Like she really struggled. She's a little itty bitty little kid, but that kind of learning, I think, is just fantastic if you're a better teacher than I happen to be. I mean, I tried, but you know, I don't know that we got there.
To be honest, it sounds like you're an excellent teacher. I mean, this is what we do. This is literally what our system does automatedly.
Okay.
So you were doing it with your child. And so that's wonderful, right? And that's why she is where she is now.
Some of the Common Core stuff that I've seen makes sense. It's how I do math as someone who's not like, you know, I can do math in my head. So I'm smart enough to do that, but I have to chunk it out kind of like how you do in Common Core a lot of times where I'm like 852 plus, you know, 715. Well, I'm going to have to simplify this. And so I'll simplify the hundreds, I'll simplify the tens, and then sort out the last few numbers that are left, if that makes sense at all. So I can add complex numbers because I kind of use a Common Core type approach. Is that something that's useful though at the higher levels of math with algebra, or does that system start to break down when you simplify problems, you know, in your head because you're trying to do it without a piece of paper?
Well, look, anytime you can simplify a problem, you should be simplifying a problem.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
Well, look, anytime you can simplify a problem, you should be simplifying a problem.
Oh, okay, good.
That's like the trick to problem solving.
Yeah, right.
And this is what I do on a constant basis when it comes to software, right? Can I solve a simpler problem? If I can solve a simpler problem that's right, then I can probably solve the more complex problem, right?
Yeah.
So look, I mean, in the end, it doesn't matter how you add, so long as you get the right answer when you're done. And the thing about it is that like whatever's going to help you add helps you add. For me, what's important is that you know to apply the addition in that case, right? And that's what's missing with some of these students. And it's not that they never learn it, and that's really the thing that like I have someone who works in my yard, and he can't read. He's illiterate. We were driving to the dump one day, and I said, "You got to turn right on Dartmouth." And I was on my phone because I had the maps up, and I got distracted, and we blew past Dartmouth, and I'm like, "Dude, what up?" Yeah. And he's like, "Dude, I can't read." I'm like, "Whoa," right? But if I pull the wrong number of 20s out of my pocket, he knows, right? Yeah. Because he can multiply the 20s. And it's a life skill. It's so important that the guy who doesn't know how to read knows how to multiply, right? It's not that he didn't learn it. It's at a time when it could have made a difference. So even with addition, right, people get it. And they know it, and they pull out a calculator and they do it, right? It makes them functional human beings. And at the end of the day, that's what this is about. You want a successful student. A successful student can do the problem solving. Because when you get to college and you're looking at the statistics, and they're teaching you the statistics, if you understand what they're telling you, and then you go into the business course and you're able to apply it towards a business to solve a real life business problem, right? Well, now you're a winner, right? Because you've lowered your odds of failure, right? What we're really doing with mathematics when it comes to business is we're walking into the casino and we're saying, how do I make this a winning proposition for me? I'm still rolling the dice, but if I'm 75% going to win, I'm still going to roll the dice, right?
Yep. No, this makes total sense, and you know,
when I got done being a spy in the Army and everything, I couldn't find a real job, so I had to become a handyman. And I had to use math all the time, and I had to use weighted problems because someone would come. I would go to your house and you'd say, here's the stuff that I want to do. What do you think that'll cost me? And I'm like, that looks like about 6 hours of work. But understand, if I've got to go to the hardware store, I'm charging you for my time to go over there. I will solve this problem for you. But all of these things add up to this number. Plus, I know that I undervalue myself all the time. And I end up going, damn it, that wasn't worth it. So I'm going to put a 25% rider to overcome my own like fear of asking for too much money. And so I would, put a number on top of that and go, okay, now is that number good enough? Yeah, that number's good enough. And maybe a little more, a little less. But I mean, it was a real word problem to try to figure these things out. And then also to develop the ability mathematically without doing math, but like to look at things and go, that pile of rocks is an hour to move that. That's going to be 95 minutes. That's going to be, and so to know what something was, I don't know how I did that, but you could cognate.
Estimation.
Estimation. And I'd be done in 8 hours. We'll call it 10 because there'll be something weird that happens. This is going to take me 10 hours. This is going to take this. This is why I'm charging you that. And then all bets are off if one day I drilled into a wall in San Francisco and I drilled into a dead cat. So that changed the entire job. And I'm like, this changes things. And they're like, I don't care. Get the cat out of the wall, So the unknown variable, the dummy variable that you have to add in sometimes. But that's all. Yeah. That's all math. I didn't realize I'd learned that in the classroom, or did I learn that through life experience?
I mean, in the end, I don't know if it matters, right? I mean, really for us, it's about having that student empowered by mathematics. So our mission is to empower children with mathematics. Our vision is to change the way the world teaches mathematics. And the idea is if I can empower enough children with mathematics, sooner or later, these guys are going to have to turn their head and say, hey, what are these guys doing? And how can we be leveraging it to help us in the classroom?
Yeah, I love it, man. I love what you guys are doing. And I love that these things are available for this generation because it really can take a kid like me. I was a latchkey kid, free range. But if I had something that was interesting for me to do on a computer growing up as a kid, I might have sat down and did some math before I threw a ball against the wall, which is, again, a form of math. You're learning geometry and everything and energy and physics and all that kind of stuff. You just don't have anybody to apply it to those things. But, you learn predictive analysis. Like I need to run over there, because I threw the ball against the wall and off the roof and everything else. So I want to talk to you, the founder, the PhD in mathematics and computer science. First question I have is when I looked through your thing, I didn't see a master's degree. You went bachelor's straight to PhD. Is that correct? Or did I miss something?
Yeah, that's correct. When you're doing that, they give you the option because it's just a number of credit hours. So right. When you get to a certain number of credit hours, you get a master's. And then when you get a certain number of credit hours, you get to a PhD. So they ask you, would you like to walk? And I said, nah, the hell with it. I'll just walk. Yeah. I'll just walk when I get the PhD.
Because really, if you already have a master's and then you enter a PhD program, you ultimately end up with another master's degree. You're right. There's just enough classroom time. And then why Denver?
Well, that's a great question. It's kind of a funny story, but I was trying to go to Brown. I wanted to do computer graphics. And I guess someone didn't send a recommendation letter, and so I didn't get in because of that.
Yeah.
And it just turned out that, that person could help me get back into DU because they didn't send that recommendation letter. And so not as if it was I'll be honest, it didn't feel like at that point it was a challenge because I was already going there. Right.
Right.
But, I was going to get into some grad school probably. And so I just kind of ended up back in the same place. And I got a job here in Denver, doing software for Dish Network, EchoStar. And, just lived in Denver. I basically Colorado native all my life.
Yeah. So just no real good reason to leave. And it seems like it suits you well. Were you always going to found something? And if not, what's your founder story?
Well, so I guess, yeah. I've always kind of been that guy who was trying to think of how do I turn this into a business? My parents were they had come in from India and they had built motels basically. And so like the people they were hanging around were entrepreneur types. And there was always these kind of games going on. Like if you walk into a restaurant, like, how does this place work? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in my 20s, I tried to start a couple of things, though I don't think I was more interested in the programming of it and the sales of it. And then ultimately I started working for a contract software engineering firm, and I found myself in Ukraine working directly for the client at some point. And they basically came down and said, well, like, what if we just hired you as an independent contractor? And I'm like, okay, let's do that then. And so then I'm out in Ukraine. I'm an independent contractor, but I've been working for a contracting firm. So I say, well, dude, just let me hire a couple of people. I mean, I'll offload the work. You don't need to drive the Ferrari through the residential neighborhood is what I told them. So you don't need a PhD. You don't need a PhD to be working on your UI. I'll get some guy to just build your UI here. I've built this thing behind the scenes that's going to, it basically replicated iTunes for a cloud. So that you remember how they had that home sharing? Mm-hmm. It was like, you could open up iTunes from your cloud and you could see your music from home at work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, you don't need me to build that UI. It's a very simple UI. I'll get someone to do it for you. And that's how I got started in contract software engineering. Is that company grew to have about 35 employees at some point.
Right. And you're right. Like, yeah, why are you going to pay me to do this? Like, of course I can do it. Of course I'm glad to take your money, but let me put your money to better work. And let me do the math here for you. I can hire this guy for this number. You don't got to pay me this bigger number, and let me go do other things for you. Yeah, I get that. But by the way, I used Eric Wright's Disco Posse episode with you as sort of a background, and that's why we're sort of staying adjacent to all those topics. Everybody should go check out Eric's show, and it's just real simple. I'll put it in the show notes, but they cover a lot of the background things, and I didn't want to rehash old ground. It's one of the benefits of podcasting is we can build on a body of knowledge. So everybody should go there. And then also, if you're looking at your kid going, "Oh, you dummy," you can elephantlearning.com, super simple. And I put the case studies link up there because I think, look, you want value, you want ROI for your money. And when I looked at the pricing, God, this seems really reasonable. I mean, for less than the cost of a tutor, you got a kid clicking away and doing this, especially right now, since tutoring is such a weird thing with COVID-19 and everything. So just in general, you guys should go check out elephantlearning.com and, give it a flyer. See if your kid learns, an extra year of math in 3 months. I mean, is that a bad thing ever? I mean, I don't think so. What's coming up for you guys? You guys already have so much stuff done. You're taking curricula out to algebra, but surely you have verticals, and I guess you would have tangentials in your business as well.
Well, so right now we're focused on trying to build a team underneath us. Okay. So like, in those 3 years, I mean, I had people helping me, and then at some point I found myself completely by myself saying, now I actually have to build the culture because the product's out there, people are adopting it, but really now I got to have that culture right. That started about last year. Mm-hmm. And it's not the easiest problem to solve because it takes time. But as soon as we solve that problem, we're able to bring on the people that will support us in the roles that we have open right now. The idea is that we would use that to start to build out. We want to cover through calculus, and we want to add coding to it because I believe that if I teach you coding at the same time that I teach you algebra, your fluency with the language of mathematics is just going to be next level. Because the real big issue is that these symbols, we use them interchangeably in different contexts, and the student has to be able to see that and then determine which context are we in, right? Like the equal sign. Is she asking me to evaluate, or are we actually saying what equal really means now? Or are we in a coding context where it means I want to assign the variable?
Right.
So, I mean, or are we in a testing situation in a coding format, right? Where we put it in twice so that we see, we're asking the question, are these two quantities equal?
Yeah.
I think if we get them that language, it's just going to be, what we're going to see out of these students are just going to be next level.
Right. Yeah, interesting. And the other thing is, as you learn whatever coding and algebra side by side, it's like if you liken it to video games, if you're really good with the video game paddle, you can translate that knowledge to other video games and get there faster than someone who's never picked that paddle up in their life. And like, how do you normally move? Well, we normally move with this button. Doesn't matter if that button's X or not. Like, that's the action button. This is the jump button. And, it does translate across. And then, like you said, when you look at a variable, it's not what does this mean? It's like, okay, it means one of these things, whether it means evaluate or whatever. And yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And then what about for like professional folks who are trying to, improve their, just approach to how math involves their day-to-day life? Is there going to be some kind of adult-based program that gets us to a more comfortable place with the math that we encounter day to day?
Yeah. So as we covered through calculus, I believe this will do the same thing, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to put that base understanding of the ideas and the language underneath it so that as you're walking through it, and I think actually going into some topics and treating them maturely, even with the younger students or with the older students, right? I think it's the same thing, right? You just have to try to treat it maturely. I think the biggest thing that our education system does right now that is problematic is we don't try to treat it maturely. We try to treat the children as children. And I think that even for young children, if you're using the language, meaning like English or whatever language you're in, appropriately, they're picking it up. They want to learn it. They want to be able to communicate better. And so I think we're doing them a disservice by not treating them maturely around these things and giving them these shortcuts that actually don't make sense. Because I think that to be honest with you, that they're smarter than that. And they know that what they're being fed is BS.
Yeah. Or boring or too slow or all these things. One of the things for sure that we know is that if you put 30 kids in a classroom, they all learn math at a different rate at different times. It's not something that there's a single solution for. And then we're really
bad.
The
classroom problem is very interesting because there's 30 students in the classroom. And I don't know if it's that they learn at different paces so much as that they're at 30 different levels. Mm-hmm. So like earlier on when you were saying like, does mathematics need to be taught very specifically for that student? I mean, I don't want to say yes and I don't want to say no, but the thing is that if they're at different levels of understanding, that same conversation is not going to work.
Right.
So for example, like the example I like to give is if you or I walked into a third year biochem course, we've missed 3 years of jargon. The professor's going to sound like they're speaking English, but we're not going to understand anything they're saying because they're using that 3 years of jargon that we just didn't understand. And now it doesn't mean that we couldn't go pick up that 3 years of jargon and understand it, right? In a similar manner, that's actually what's happening, right? So if you got a third grader whose understanding of mathematics is at a first grader level, so they're about 2 years behind conceptually, well, what the teacher's talking about doesn't make any sense for them. And basically what I'm saying is what we figured out how to do was add that language for them so that now it does make sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I was in school, again, I'm using myself as an anecdote so that no one else has to feel the pain of not being good at math. But, I was good at science. And so I got recommended for a higher level of science freshman year in high school. And that meant that, biology instead of like natural science. And then the next year you would automatically go into chemistry. Well, I had not even really survived pre-algebra. Why in the world am I in chemistry? So I got in there and we would talk about things. I understood what a joule was, but and I understood like that's the periodic table and these are weighted and this chart makes sense. All that I could get. But when they're like, solve this problem, no chance. Not even. And you can't slow down enough to get me to catch up because there's just too much back work to do. So it's a great real life example of how do you get your kid caught up in some area. And in reality, I shouldn't have been put into chemistry. I mean, that's a failure of the school, but they don't know that. They just go, okay, you got through biology. All right.
Well, if it was the first year chemistry course, then the language that was missing should have been taught by the teacher.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the important part, right? I mean, the important part is to get that basics in. And I mean, with chemistry, it might be a little bit challenging just because there is no why. This is just what they've observed. Yeah. Right.
Well,
if we knew why, we probably, and I mean, I'm sure there's some people that know why, right? But like in the first year chem course, That's not what they're trying. That's not what they're trying to tell.
Well,
me.
yeah, and then you think about the concepts I had been learning in science. It was, why does a bean sprout grow? Because of photosynthesis, and how do you improve that? Determining the amount of joules of energy that has to hit a bean sprout to make it have. Like, I couldn't do any of that stuff. So it's an interesting thing. I was going to ask you something.
I'm amazed they asked you that.
Well, I'm making that part up. But whatever it was, you had to figure out. It was miles ahead of what I ever got to in that. Anyhow, forget about that. I wanted to ask you, one of the best math classes I ever took was when I was getting my master's degree. And again, when I say master's degree and math class, let me explain. A guy named Bentley Erdworm was a statistician, and he's like, I'm going to teach you stats. You don't need to learn formula and how to answer problems. You need to learn how it works in Excel and how to put a guy like me to work and how to know, what questions to ask me to make sure that my stats are accurate and doing what you want them to do. And so that has proven to be one of the most powerful classes throughout my entire adult life, was understanding I didn't have to learn that answer. I can literally type it into Google now or Bing, and it'll give me an answer to the question as long as I can type it out accurately. So he was right. I needed to learn how to read and understand stats and how to put a statistician to work as opposed to doing them myself. He's like, let me do the math. Give me the hardest math problem ever. And like he would explain, like rolling dice, like, yes, it's 1 in 6 every time, except for, when you add in these variables, because you're not just going to roll like, yeah, every roll was individual, but when you put them together, it's a different thing. And it blows your mind when a statistician is talking about all of these, ways to look at chance versus probability, Is that something
I know what you mean.
You guys will add? It's like the management of mathematic tools or AI or that kind of thing?
Well, honestly, what we were thinking about doing was topics like probability theory, right? Because as soon as we can change, my main goal now, so like this is just a recent development. So when you say like, but my main goal right now is if I can change the idea of mathematics from how do I do this to this is a tool, right? Because how do I do this? And the problem is that like the words, how do I do this, apply in both contexts.
Right.
So like now in my mind, I'm having problems, but like, how do I do this? So the student comes to you and says, how do I do this? And as a parent, even like, like if you ask me, and I'm disciplined at this now, right? So I might stop and say, okay, wait, I shouldn't be answering, how do I do this? I should be finding out what they don't understand, right? But I would have that initial urge as a human being to now just show the student how to do it. And this is kryptonite. And people come back to us all the time and say, well, can you explain to the student how to do the problem if they answered incorrectly? And the answer is no. And the reason why is this. If they memorize how to do it, and then they start getting the right answer, but they don't have the understanding, well, now you've bypassed our system.
Yeah. I mean, this is to a T,
right?
Defining how I tried to learn algebra was I can make the right answer show up in this level of problem. 2 levels up in that problem, I had no ability to adapt to the change in the problem, and the complexity. And really, it's a baby step, but I could never get over that hurdle reliably. Never could.
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing is that like, it is that's how it's presented to us at young age. So like, that's what I'm saying. As a human being, that's my urge. That's my thought of mathematics. But now that I'm viewing mathematics from a different context, right? From the context of, but where has it been useful in my life? Well, it's been useful in my life as a tool, right? As a tool to solve, how do I do this? And that's the real problem is that like, yeah, I got to change the context, but on both sides of the context is how do I do this, right? But it's the tool, right? Like for your software engineer, for your physicist, for your chemist, right? It doesn't matter which STEM major you go into. They're using mathematics as a tool. In business, they're using mathematics as a tool. You have to have your statistician on board. You got to be able to formulate the problem for them.
Yeah.
And then you got to be able to look at the answer and understand the answer as well, right? Maybe it's not so important how they got there, right? But like at any given point in time, heck, even for marketing, mathematics is the tool for getting success. I mean, we use set intersection to figure out what is our audience in Facebook.
Right. Yep. The other thing where it comes into handy, even if you're not a statistician or an AI person, as a leader, you know, when we'll just say when President Trump is being briefed on the models, you know, I hear models and I go, okay, well, that's a model. It's going to absolutely be wrong. You know, models are never, ever, like the correlation between accuracy and a model, it's got to be pretty close to zero because they just never get it right. It's not that they're not right, but they're trying to guess. And there's too many variables to account for. And so when they're like 5 million people or 4 million people, you have to go, all right, this model is going to improve. We're going to know more. What's the most prudent action, given that we know that this model is just a guess? But we don't see a lot of that kind of thing. Like, we really believe hard in the model. And then I think anybody who makes the model be like, ooh, you're putting too much faith in this. This is just based on what we know right now, what we think might happen, but nobody can predict the future.
These things are challenging, right? Like when you're using like the models for, you know, regression or whatnot,
right,
to fit these curves, right? The model's also always giving you back an error rate. And the real challenge is this. It comes down to not just what the model generated, but it also comes to the data that you're feeding in.
Right.
And whenever something is politically motivated, I mean, gosh, how do you know? And this is the real problem. When I was in high school, I did cross-examination debate.
Okay.
And there was evidence for both sides of the issue. I guarantee that. For 3 or 4 sides of the issue, there was evidence. The whole thing with cross-examination debate was that you had to be able to pull out a piece of evidence. And what we're seeing right now with the media is they are coming back to you and they're making you even question what is science. Because like, you got one channel that's so hardcore that this is science, this is real, this is what it is. And you got another channel that says, whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the answer is somewhere in between.
Always.
Right? Out there are scientists that are doing good work. It's appearing in, you know, peer-reviewed journals. And for the most part, we can look at it and we can say, to the best of our ability, this is fact.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Statistically speaking, this is fact. And then there's other stuff where, like, I mean, they're just trying to manipulate the numbers to fit the statistical model to get the curve out that they want to get to prove their point because of whatever agenda for God knows even what. Yeah. But, you know, it is what it is.
It is what it is. And for whatever reason, again, like some math comprehension in terms of the practical application of these, you know, these models, you know, as a PhD, you know this, like you're either building on, challenging, or creating new knowledge. And I don't think there's a PhD out there that say this is the definitive answer. Like you have a piece of a puzzle, and someone takes a nip out of your piece of the puzzle because you missed something. It doesn't mean your whole portion, your whole contribution is wrong. It's just like this area here, we couldn't reliably repeat and everything. So there's all this binary value put to things that are not binary things. You know, like you're a racist, you're not a racist. You know, this is the answer to COVID. This is not the answer to COVID. These things, like you said, they end up being in the middle. And again, like when you start to apply mathematic principles, you know, here I am, the non-PhD mathematician, but that you understand that like there's a whole lot more balance that needs to happen in these things. And that means you have to tolerate some uncomfortable realities. Science, it turns out, I don't know if you know this, but science evolves over time and it improves in certain areas. It's not definitive black and white, hardly ever, you know?
A lot of it depends on the hypothesis that they're using to prove, right? And I mean, that is also something to a mathematician that's kind of counterintuitive because, like, for example, with COVID, if you want to find out what are the underlying factors that are causing the disease to be significant, I'd say go get a data scientist. I mean, I've seen data science, you've seen statisticians do amazing things with the amounts of data from just New York alone. What they could have collected in that first 2 weeks would have probably given us all the information in the world. And I believe Oracle tried to work on it. I don't know like how many people bought into it, but you know, I don't know. It's challenging. Here's what I found. What I found is that on a mass scale, human beings kind of start to understand what truth is. Like they know truth kind of. I mean, there's a lot of mumbo jumbo that you can do to make them feel like something's true. But in general, like when I'm telling someone something that I know is true, meaning like it's mathematically true, it's conceptually true, it's logically true, right?
Right.
It's not something I have to go out and form a hypothesis and test about. When I tell someone something that is just true, they tend to realize it's true.
They tend to. And it's true that Barry Bonds was the greatest hitter during his era that probably has ever lived. But there's still the worst hitter who goes out there and swings at that one pitch and hits the home run and defeats Barry Bonds, you know, frequently. And it's just like, he's maddening. Because the truth is that there's always something in that system that denies, you know, everything has to regress to the mean, just about. And regression to the mean. Well, listen, I've had you for over an hour. Anything you want to say in closing?
No, I think, I mean, if you want to check out Elephant Learning, just go to our website and check it out, elephantlearning.com, or if you Google us, check us out on Facebook. And thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I like talking about smart stuff with smart people. It helps make me a little bit smarter each time. So yeah, thank you again. Everybody go to elephantlearning.com. If you can't figure that out, go to the show notes. Glad to help you out there. And if you have any questions at all, let me know. You can email me and I'll forward it over and we'll get you connected. So thank you so much. Everybody, learn math. It'll help.